No?
Johnson.
Here.
Berlin. Benz.
Present.
Tuck. Booz. Zornick.
Here.
Cleaver.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent.
Then we'll go to the first line item for approval of the August 9th, 2022 meeting minutes. Did anybody have any questions or comments before
I was
making a
just
motion?
wondering on, down near the bottom, under the Todd Lakey legal paragraph, says second bullet, we suggested changing the word, or you would suggest changing the word together to impact, but we didn't actually do that, right? We kept the word together. I was just confused.
That was
I
just,
didn't
that was just
remember.
discussion, and so you would have to go to the motion to find exactly what you had asked in
I
the
just
motion. Yeah, that was
read
just
that and I
discussion.
thought, is that exactly how it went? But
Yeah, I'd have to go back to the graphic of which one was the original one on that one.
Wait, is Troy present online? Who is that? Oh, is that you? Oh, okay, sorry, it was Thorby off. Okay, sorry.
all right, as long as that didn't affect what we
So
did. then
just a point of order, if I could just explain. So the minutes, you'll just see are just the discussion, it's just highlight points. But if you want to know exactly what the motion was, if you go to the bolded part, then that's to ensure that that was captured correctly.
And in there, we just said removing contiguous and together, and we kept together. I think what we had said was removing, not having both words in there, just having one. And this sounds like we removed.
Right. I can tell you that I did listen to that several times, so that is almost verbatim, but
Any other questions or comments? If not, can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I move that we accept the minutes.
Thank you, Kathleen. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Stephen. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Next line item is to review public map submissions and public comments received from the online survey and open house. And that is also these? Is that what these are also?
everything.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I want to thank Amy Bowman and the clerk's office. Amy Bowman's our communications director, and the clerk's office, I think what you have before you is the total sum of the public input that was provided.
Quick question about, so these were publicly submitted maps, correct?
So, yeah, I want to speak to, just respond immediately to your question. There were, option 2 map was a map that was configured in one of our open houses. As the information was collected, I gathered, this was from a Robin DeBoer, option 3 is Robin DeBoer and her husband. So there are 2 submissions that represent honest attempts at trying to create a map. My math count showed the largest to the smallest, and the variation, I think map option 2 was maybe a 13% variance, and I think option 3 was like a 10.4% variance, which is just outside. That was on my initial math. I let them know that their submissions would still be captured formally and distributed for your consideration, and it would be up to you to do the math. I think Nathan's already doing the math. You know, the variance from the 16,700 with you divide that difference by 16.7, that's your gap above and below. What's important in their narrative, and I think this is just important feedback for you to try to capture, is their attempt, and I believe their comments are also, let's see. Are their comments, or are their comments separate? Did you provide their, I think these were comments that were provided separately.
Is it
I
the
don't know,
two
did I
handwritten
steal
ones?
them or not give them back to you?
What you took from me was just the numbers that you gave to Craig. I didn't have any actual public comment.
I think I put those in another file. I can tell you, I can summarize what their input was on the maps, is they were trying to ensure that that the core of the city would be a sort of a self-contained district, if that made sense. Their concern with the map, as we have it, the draft map, is the core of the city is included in all of these districts that go out to the exterior, and hypothetically, you could still have 6 members who live on the exterior of the city, if that makes sense. By having a self-contained in option 2, you see kind of zone 1 and zone 6, we're trying to have sort of contained districts. In option 3, you kind of see it with zone 5, was to ensure that the center core of the city would be its own district. I hope I'm doing justice to kind of what their attempts were and what their concerns were, so.
So you said it was it the Foresters?
De Boer, I think, is that what you said?
Robin and Trevor DeBuer, which their comments aren't, I think, on this list.
They don't
I
have
think
any
that's a concern.
comments. No, but they did attend the Tuesday, August 16th.
Right.
And maybe I should run and go get copies of that sheet. 'cause I
But
don't
only
think I
one
handed
of
it back
these
to you.
fits the legal.
Did you say?
Yeah, barely, kind
Neither
of. It's-
one, neither one truly
Yeah, because
does.
I would say 2 has a bigger gap
Yeah.
than 3.
Mr. Lakey,
Yeah.
if it's
Very balanced.
10.4 versus a
Pretty wide
10% deviation, are we still on solid ground?
I mean, the number they pull out is 10%. So if it's above 10%, you're beyond the standard.
So they're both above 10%.
That's what it sounds like. I haven't done the math, but yeah.
And I just want to say, I know at the last meeting, we talked about kind of how we felt about that checkerboard approach where they meet at the corner. One exactly does that, the other one almost does that, just pointing that out.
Yeah, I see like in option 3, especially for zone 3, it's in this
I mean, ours
kitty corner there.
kind of does that too, but I'm just wondering how it's better. What did they say?
So it keeps the, so right now,
Other than just keeping that
Right.
center core.
well, right now, if you look at the map, the proposed map, anyone could live anywhere within any of these districts.
Right.
And so that means somebody in District 1 could be from the extremities up at the top and therefore not have a vested interest or at least understand the impact of what the decisions on the people who live closer to the core of the city, still within that District 1. Same thing with District 2, 3, and 6. And I think the logic is that they would like someone who's your neighbor, right? In the center of the city, who can speak to the impact of being in that area of town. Versus right now, the potential is every single one of these districts, except for maybe 4 and 3, has the potential of having someone who is far removed from the center of the city, speaking to events and impact on the center of the city. I don't know if I captured that correctly.
But I think you have that with your other zones as well. And so basically, if you're saying that the center of the city is more important than the other districts,
No,
you know, but that, because I'm looking at all of these maps and they all have a district somewhere that is very widespread. And so by changing which we think is most important, we're saying, you know, the center of the city should have different considerations than the other areas. And I'm not sure if that's the message we want to give either.
right, I'm just trying to understand.
No, I understand. And so
Yeah.
just thinking out loud about whether that makes sense or not.
I guess it kind of does in the fact that somebody, it doesn't have to be everybody, but somebody needs to speak for and speak to what's happening to those of us in the center of town,
Right.
right? And the potential, I think, that they're raising is that with the proposed map, there may be nobody who could do that. And it's not that the center of the city is more important than the periphery. I think the concern is, will there be someone to speak for the center of the city? Does that make sense? Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, I just read the email. Amy's going to make copies and we'll distribute, so that you can have in your own record the email. But it was really a picture with the precincts written down, and then Craig Tarter was helpful enough from GIS to create these maps. So to be clear, these maps weren't created as far as the artifacts that are before you. But it does reflect what they were. But the sentiment in our interaction at the open house, as well as the email, was wanting to guarantee that someone lives in the center of the city. And the map as we have it, well, the center of the city is represented, the whole city is represented, right? That technically someone could live sort of on the exterior of the city, and then it goes in and captures the center of the city.
But I look at these others, and so for instance, on the proposed map, I would be in District 5. On this one, I would be in District 2. Way in the corner there, Middleton, and yet I could be represented by somebody who lives out by St. Al's.
Yeah.
And so, you kind of look at that, and they all, and so I'm just saying, so why are the people who live in the center of the city being given more weight than the people who live in other fairly populated areas, but farther out? And so that's just my question. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying, because I understand that, but is the center of the city more important than the other areas of the city?
Yeah, and I'm just reporting out what the narrative was, the why behind their attempt to make the maps. And even, there's a checkerboard in both of those maps, you probably have already observed that, which is legally allowed, and I told them, but like District 6 and Map 2, 31 and 43 kind of touch at the corner, and then in Map 3, you'll notice District 3 has 32 and 34, which is a checkerboard. They touch at the corner and go across.
But in the proposed map, we have
Well,
that.
and Nathan would like to make a point of order. We don't want to carry multiple conversations.
I think it's a moot point, just because I just verified the numbers, and what Rick had said. The variances on option 2 is 13.3, variance on option 3 is 10.5. And so those maps are not valid according to how I understood the code.
I think, however, that the sentiment that prompted this reimagining is one that has come up in previous comments. People are feeling, so if you look at the comments from last time, people are concerned that the districts will not adequately represent their interests because they're too big, diverse, whatever, fill in the blank. And so in this particular iteration, it was the center of the city. In the other previous comment, it was somebody who objected to being lumped in with the center of the city. And so I don't think that we are going to be able to remedy that, but it is something that we probably should be mindful of and address somehow, let people know.
May I? So I would say the 14 comments that we received isn't the people. It's 14 comments. Of those, it's 50-50 agree and disagree, with several being neutral.
Does that new one include the previous comments?
Yeah, this has the ones we saw last time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, so this would be an aggregate total of the comments on the spreadsheet. Cindy Hartley, because she filled out the form, we literally copied that one. And then you'll see the attendance sheet. Well, actually, there's two, front and back, Cindy Hartley and then MP Vasquez. So I just want to call that artifact out as a front-back copy. That includes the two who filled out the forms. And then the second front-back is the number of people who signed in at the open houses. So there was 6 people who came to the first one and 12 who came to the second one. And while they didn't, I'm reluctant to try to represent the sentiment of those groups if they didn't speak for themselves by submitting comment. But in open house, I can say it's safe to say that after some discussion and interaction, they realized how difficult it was to come up with a map. So I'd say that there was kind of a consensus like, oh, wow, And they're like, and maybe there's a couple attempts and it was like, okay, this is really hard. But the two maps that you have were attempts that were close. And while the preliminary math that I did, I wanted you as the committee to, you can make the determination math-wise and say they don't meet the criteria. I felt better you doing that than me preemptively saying based on my math. If it was outrageously outside the context, I would have been like, oh, this is way off. But
13 is probably as far off as several of the maps already
Yep.
rejected. And I get what they're saying, but I think that argument could be made for every district. And I don't know if there's another way. We haven't seen yet another proposal that meets the law.
Yeah. And I think that this is kind of a double-edged sword because people are excited about like more direct representation as in this person lives in my part of the world type thing. But then people get sticky about what their part of the world happens to be. And I think that because of the constraints, the legal constraints, the numerical constraints, I think people just need to figure out how to be neighborly with each other. These are your peeps now.
That would solve a lot of problems.
I know.
Well, and I think to kind of turn us back over into these items, as far as in this option 2, I mean, the way that it should be viewed is that these two should be viewed as the way that we handled the first time when we were looking at these maps. And so as far as an option 2, with it being over 13.3, over 10%, then that should be eliminated. And as far as into option 3, we've discussed a lot already, even just now, and then from the previous ones, about how we wanted to maintain a connection to it. But I think as far as when we developed the first map, we stuck to particular guidelines that we wanted to do. So based off of that, I would say we eliminate option 3 as well from into this consideration as well.
We kind of have to, don't we?
Well, we can discuss it and keep going around to seeing if there's
But if
a
we're gonna
reason to submit it, whether it's an alternate or something of the sort, but I just don't see, since we've already set it on ourselves into that, I don't see that we should be changing our method of how to approach as far as in the mapping for it. I get what Stephanie was talking about into that, and I think a big part of that too, though, is actually something that will actually go on a little bit further down into the agenda about as far as in discussing the narratives of how we came up to the map. So maybe that might be something we can bring to that. I think it's a very valid point. Is there any other questions or comments? And as far as for this, we just have to approve that we receive the submissions?
yeah, Mr. Chair, I think it's on the agenda just to, I think for the record, acknowledge that the open houses and the public comment period have come and passed. This represents the sum total of what came. You've put your eyes on it. If you want to act on it, if you want to act as far as like considering a submission, you could, entertain a motion, but otherwise you've received the report and there's no action required.
Okay. I would like to ask, at least from any of the others, if anybody got to attend any of the open houses. I got to for one, but
I showed up. I got to hang out for a little while. It was the three of us.
well, I got to attend the second one, and so I found it extremely informative, at least from individuals. And it didn't take very long before everybody was attacking the puzzles in some form or another. So it was great getting to see as far as into that method. And obviously, it did lead to a lot of new methods into this. So just wanted to make a note to appreciate that and for everybody who was able to attend those open houses. So then if no action is needed onto that, then we'll move on to the third agenda item for approving proposed resolution. And if we could just get some guidance on what we need to do for that one.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll move to approve the proposed council district map as provided in our packet with a recommendation to go to the city council for adoption.
Thank you, Matthew. Can I get a second?
That's just to essentially approve the map we've already approved.
Put it in, yeah.
To recommend to council.
Second.
Thank you, Stephanie. Discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We talked about adding additional in the Region 5 to go up to the city impact area. It's not depicted on the map.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. What was the question, Mr. Cleaver?
So, Area 5 at Midway, I believe it was supposed to go further to the west. It's not depicted on the map.
Area 5 or Area 51?
Oh, at Roosevelt, was that it?
That's right.
Mr. Chair, I think I would defer to GIS, Greg Tartar. I think, because I think you caught this on an earlier that it was corrected. Is the one that's up, the updated one?
It was motion 4 in our last meeting.
Yeah, it
It's
should be,
just not shown on,
it looks like it just needs to count 4723, which goes up to,
Yeah, the two that are displayed on the screen,
Goes up
those
to
are the
Orchard, it
public
looks like.
input maps. Those are not the proposed from the districting committee. We did make the adjustment, expanding District 5 as directed. Yeah, the packet has the first iteration that didn't have the recommended adjustments. We've since made an adjustment to that.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll seek to amend my motion just for the purpose of clarifying and correcting that the section as previously discussed would be updated on this map that's in our packet to reflect that change.
Could
a
we,
second for that motion.
well, before, could we hear the original motion? Because I think it just said as proposed, the public one, correct?
So my original motion was to recommend to the council the proposed council district map as it's in our packet.
Okay.
But Nathan identified we've got the error of that missing part. So the purpose for my amendment, if my second's okay with it, is just with the clarification of that additional correction on
west of
west of
Midway.
Midland for District 5,
Midway.
or Midway, sorry.
And Stephanie, do you?
Yes.
Okay.
No problem.
Stephanie approves the modified motion, okay.
Craig's putting it up. Do they have to teams between each other?
It does say that.
Did we lose it? It's the battle of ITs, who's gonna win?
Good catch, Nathan, thank you.
So while we're waiting for that, I know, are we in a discussion phase?
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of this, so this would be step one to propose the map. Do we also need to complete any kind of paperwork, official paperwork, because it does mention the city code? Oh, there it is. It's beautiful.
Oh.
Yeah.
This is what was published for the open house and stuff.
Okay.
Apologies, I think this packet just reflected the
Yeah, it was what was in our minutes last,
pre-edit.
yeah, it was in our last minutes.
Oh, and now we have it up. Okay.
And it's up on the screen as well. So.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, are we still in discussion on the motion? So the end product that comes out of the committee is a resolution. Don't have the draft in front of you. You can either authorize the chairman to sign it, or we can have another one and go over the draft. But the components of the resolution or the code are basically technical descriptions of what you're approving that aren't listed in the map, but would need to be described in the resolution. It needs to include a map of the city of Nampa showing the exact locations of the designated council districts labeled with district numbers corresponding to the council seats. So I think that's in the map. Then a description of the boundaries of the districts described by names of streets or other established features or landmarks. So that would just look at the map and we'd call out some of the main streets on either side. A declaration that the city council seat shall be designated with numbers corresponding to the like-numbered city council districts in accordance with Nampa City Code. That's kind of redundant, but it would be, we would include that the numbers are as they are stated in the map. And then that gets translated, excuse me, not translated, transmitted to the city council. So your approval of the map will enable the resolution to be put together. It'll have some recitals as to the process that you went through in the meetings you had. I guess I would leave that up to you if you want us to bring a resolution back or how you want to approach it this meeting.
As part of that, would we need to declare in the resolution why we've labeled them as far as like in the P numbers in the districts as far as into that? Because we changed that in our last.
Right, you change the precinct labels a little bit.
Right.
That isn't really called out in the specifics. It's more the outer boundaries of the districts themselves. So I don't know that that would be necessary, Mr. Chairman. You could if you wanted to, by way of explanation, but,
Or that could be the narrative.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman. Todd, my understanding is the resolution that the city passed, that we make a recommendation to them about what the map, we don't have to make a recommendation of what the resolution is. Only thing we have to do is give them a recommendation of the map with a number.
So you give them a recommendation, that formal recommendation is encapsulated in the resolution. That's the document that's transmitted to the city.
I was trying to avoid not seeing another
Right.
document.
Right. I think you could do that if you wanted to.
So personally, I'd suggest we just have the discussion. We know what we want to arrive at. We can discuss the narrative we want, which will be the whereases and the recital, and then we allow staff to prepare that subject to the chair's final review and approval. I don't think we need to come back as a whole committee to read the whole thing. That's my personal opinion.
Okay with that? If you're all okay with that?
If it's simply a fill in the blanks, street boundaries, is it possible just to do that right now? After we approve the map, so the motion's on the floor to send this map, can we just fill in the blanks, be done?
Yes, you could. I mean, if you leave it to us, we would be calling out some main streets on the edges of the districts. If you want to do that here,
And then the narrative is a supplement to that resolution, correct?
I'm sorry, Stephanie. what?
So the next item, which is the narrative, that is a supplement to that resolution, is not encapsulated within that resolution, correct?
So
I think this was initially, it sounds like now from what you were just saying, actually, 3 and 4 now actually are one and the same. If it's encapsulated in the resolution, then maybe that's our case.
you could, I mean, call out separate narratives, but it's not required in code. I think as Matt described, your narratives would be what I would look to put in your whereases, your recitals in the resolution. As my first reaction and how to prepare the resolution, but again, it's up to you.
Yeah, I thought it had to be different, so that's why. But if it's the case, then we can just cover both then already in action item 3.
And so I guess clarification. Right now, if we approve the city map and we approve because, we did that because, the narrative, the whereases, it is acceptable to send that back and have staff fill in the street labels, because they're not visible on the maps that we have in front of us. We'd have to look at Google Map or whatever, which is I pulled up, to fill in those street labels. It is perfectly acceptable to do that at another time, and then the chairman signs that. Yes?
You could do it that way.
Mr. Chairman, Stephanie, I know, my guess is staff, Mr. Daniel Badger and Craig Tarter, would work to, I think no one's disputing the map. Providing the legal definition or what satisfies the legal criteria and work with, legal would represent what you're approving as the map.
Okay.
I think there's still some question on how specific we need to be as far as every street, south to this street, to that intersection. I think staff and legal can work out to make sure that your map is accurately depicted legally. We're, of course, just a reminder for the public who might be watching, we're using precincts as the puzzle pieces, and the precincts were established by the county for our internal purposes, and the county's not present because of the election. They may or may not have legal descriptions on how they establish the precincts. I don't know, but staff can maybe work with the county just to make sure.
Do those precincts suffice to satisfy the legal description?
I would say we couldn't just call out precincts. The code does say described by names of streets or other established features or landmarks.
And we've written these types of descriptions before for other things that we've done when we do our impact area and those kind of things. That the physical description of that's certainly something Public Works and engineering staff can handle.
We may have to be a little creative with the corners in the middle of Lake Lowell.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're dividing it up in there.
The extended,
Go straight from the west boat
By
dock.
giant road number 4.
we can figure that one out. An extended line of this.
Just
road.
follow this boat. It goes by every hour.
I
That's
think
how
you
it
say
divides. So.
You follow the line across the lake to this point on the other side.
Well, then, so it sounds like then for us, as far as into that, really, it's just we need to just add into the narrative the why, which kind of sounds like it's really our 4 basic bullet points that we're sharing into that piece. Is there any other ones that we should be adding into it, though?
I would suggest that since we have a motion on the floor, rather than amend that motion, we finish this motion, act on it, and then make another motion to capture the narrative, the extra information. But I don't know.
I was just trying to get us to the one map, so I agree with, let's settle that.
Okay.
We can do the narrative.
Well, then if there's no, does anybody else have any other discussion relating to this motion? Okay, then all those in favor to accepting the motion that's currently active at this time, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Then we'll now go into the last item, into figuring out the narrative of this. And I was going to check, in our packet, we don't actually have the 4 bullet points
Do we have
currently written, do we?
the updated language? The one that's in our packet was the
That was the
original.
last one, yeah.
Do we have the updated language that went out to the public?
Wasn't it in her bullet point or her PowerPoint?
Looks like this is a 3, so this one's still got
Oh,
the previous one.
Mr. Chair, so what's in the packet, that was actually the minutes. So anything that is distributed to you at the meeting needs to be a part of the minutes. So that's what you're seeing. It is not the new version.
I think it is in that email.
Yeah, so Chair, I think
Can you bring up the website?
we can bring up the website.
And it's on there?
Amy, our communications director, maybe can direct Craig Tarters.
I think it's actually in the map itself.
Design review.
And it's in the virtual open house, isn't it?
Yeah, if you click on
If you click on that top banner.
Top banner. Auto-populates as you scroll, yeah.
Also just want to make a quick note, is like, this map is awesome. The way that it was designed for the virtual, very nice and clean, so. Very cool.
Amy Bowman, she did an awesome job.
There we go.
Those are the 4 bullet points, I think. So, Mr. Chairman, just, I don't have as much experience as others sitting around this table on resolutions, but I think the recital is kind of the whereas. It might be helpful to start with why this group's even here. I don't know, it's just a thought that maybe one recital could be whereas state bill such and such was passed requiring cities 100,000 and larger to form districts, blah, blah, blah. Whereas, I don't know if that would, I don't know if it's, or to just go straight in. It might be helpful to just say that, really honestly, these efforts are to comply with the state statute, not that we're, there's just no way to tell the story without the fact that the state statute is requiring us to undertake these efforts. I think it would also reinforce that this isn't just a voluntary effort that's discretionary. It is a legally mandated effort. So what you have a hand in is, we have a legal mandate. Maybe legal can correct that if I'm saying that too strongly, but I don't think we have the option of not doing this. So I think it would underscore in the resolution to the city council, I think, just how serious this is.
I think that idea is captured in the introduction to the bullet points that are currently up on the screen. So it says, in order to meet statutory requirements, the districts must be blah, blah, blah. But I don't know if we want to back up.
I don't know if it hurts to, I know what you're saying, but I don't know if it hurts to start out with that, just so. I'm also wondering if, we have these 4 bullet points, but then should we or should we not say, whereas nothing else can really be considered, like including where current council members live?
So,
Because I think people need to understand that was not part of the decision, because it can't be legally.
Right, and maybe a little bit about, well, we have tried, there have been how many maps that were
Whereas
considered and
30-plus
rejected?
maps were,
With these two, I think we're
Thrown
at
out.
31 now.
Yeah,
well,
that were considered and rejected because they did not meet constitutional muster as described.
so, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to propose running through an outline of what a resolution would look like. And I'll try to step through it, and someone can feel free to interrupt me. But, so essentially, the resolution outline would look like, number 1, whereas the state of Idaho adopted the correct citation requiring cities over a certain size to adopt districts. Number 2, whereas the city of Nampa population per the 2020 census exceeds that, the city of Nampa proceeded to adopt ordinance and use the appropriate number of ordinance to set the requirements for adoption of council member districts. The next few whereases would just recite the history of this committee, basically as they're presented on the website, that the committee was appointed, that the committee met on these dates, considered things, held appropriate public houses, all the various parts. And so I'm not going to repeat all that, but I think staff can encapsulate that. Then whereas, and have essentially our full 4 bullet points, these are the 4 key things that were considered. Whereas the districting committee considered over a dozen proposed maps, but found essentially that only 1 was able to meet the proportional requirements from the
32.
bullet points.
33.
32 total maps, okay.
We have to.
Go to the numbers guy.
Make sure yeah.
Because of that, the committee therefore recommends the map as proposed as the one able to meet that in the south side. And then, additional whereases explaining the assignment of numbers in conformance with city code based upon essentially a attempted clockwise manner. And I think I captured the key parts of the narrative in that. And so then you'd have therefore, the committee recommends the map, and that's where then staff would fill in all the appropriate descriptions. Did I miss any?
Excellent.
I think that sounds great.
Yeah.
So if that sounds okay, I will turn that into a motion for staff to prepare the resolution in line with that committee and submit to the chair for final review and signature to be submitted to city council.
I would second that.
Okay, thank you. So Kathleen is second in motion. Discussion? Any other questions or comments? I think that's great. we can go from there. And on that motion, you said also that I would be able to sign off onto it. Okay.
Instead of the committee having to meet again and review that.
If there's no other questions or comments, then all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And that's our last action item, so can I get motion to adjourn?
Just, I have one thing I'd like to bring up. Is there any legal mechanism that can be brought to change the parameters of the restrictions that we deal with? Say instead of 10%, 15%, and then possibly could be a more balanced geographical map brought out that might satisfy more people as far as where they live in conjunction to their neighbors.
So, Mr. Chairman and Ray, the 10% part comes from Supreme Court interpretation of the Constitution. So that's, we can't really change that. The things that you can and can't consider are in state code. And it's a little tighter. The direction for the cities is a little tighter than the legislative direction, which you have to meet the constitutional requirements, but you can also consider communities of interest and geographic boundaries. And so there is a potential legislative change with that. The constitutional part you still have to meet, but the legislative directive to the cities was more direct, make your population as equivalent as possible. So there could be a legislative change in the future.
Well, but when you really look at it from a lot of the perspectives, it was really that 10% that really shifted a lot of the thinking and the methods of applying towards this too. So
I felt like it handcuffed us.
Yeah, we were pretty limited on choice. Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd just like to reflect to the record in case anybody's listening. I think this is already in there in our history, but there were a couple public comments about us not taking into account growth in particular. And I just wanted to be clear on the record. We were constrained by the census, and we very much, I would say I look forward to the next committee in 10 years getting to address that, because I suspect these districts will have to adjust quite a bit to reflect that growth, but we weren't able to get to that. But that was, I think that was a very fair comment from a number of people, but they didn't understand the constraints like Ray was saying we were facing.
That's a great point.
Mr. Chairman, just a thought, and it would take, I think Mr. Booz, like where you're trying to get at, to create some flexibility and still even maybe meet the equivalency, we didn't really have the option of cutting precincts up. Like, if there was a smaller unit of demographic data, and maybe census tracts, are they smaller than precincts? Census tracts? Like, that would have created more puzzle pieces and more ability to construct, but we were working with precincts. So, and I'm not throwing that out as a suggestion on what to do. There are some potential, there's cost benefits when you try to flex. And I don't know if there's other, the census tract data, if that's I don't know if that's an established unit of governmental recognized demographic unit. I think it is, but I don't know if that's just, if we create the census tract data, or is it created for us? We don't actually create it, so we inherit that. So there might be other units that could have potentially been more helpful, but I don't know if the state legislators could do that. But the challenge is, like, each city of the 3 cities affected would have to probably use the same puzzle pieces. Maybe, I don't know. I'd leave it up to legal to advise on something like that. So it's just, I'm just thinking out loud to follow kind of a line of thought that you had.
Kind of on that thread, was it that they chose the precincts because the counties administer city elections, or does the city administer their own elections?
The county administers elections and distributes the ballots and does all the verification, so, yeah.
Yeah, and it became pretty obvious how it was kind of essentially you're going to have to break up the precincts, especially with us being so heavy into one area. It was where it became a numbers game immediately, just trying to figure out how to divide properly into that, so.
And-
Hopefully for the next
The next
committee.
committee in 10
I'll be able to
years.
tackle that a little bit more.
He's going to be back in 10.
The dog, we'll be bringing back the dog, so.
I don't think that dog cares.
I was like, I hope they're done, no. Any other comments before we request a motion to adjourn?
I just want to say thank you to all of you who are here. It's been a fun challenge.
Definitely been an interesting puzzle, especially for the second meeting when we all had to just start flinging our documents left and right, so, our own options. All right, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll move.
Thank you, Kathleen. Can I get a second? Thank you, Nathan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye.